You can start.
Okay, nice to be here. Stefan, so I'm talking to Stefan Winner, who is head of digital at Bird Media. Bird, of course, being the company behind DLD. Stefan and I are on a DLD tour. Yesterday we were in Brussels, DLD, now we're in Tel Aviv today. So Stefan, to start, yesterday in Brussels we talked about the situation in Europe when it comes to competition. What's your analysis of the state of the innovation economy in Europe at the moment? Easy question to start off with.
You mean about in the digital field where we are, right?
Yeah.
Not overall. Because if we would talk about the overall industry, then I would say there's a huge race going on. The car industry, which is a big, very large value creation industry, has understood that it's absolutely important to change, going to automatic driving. If you see Volkswagen with new services being introduced, if you see the GV they do between BMW and Mercedes, the large car manufacturers are changing from the ultimate individual driving machine to sharing somehow. And that is not only for the car producers, but also for the rental companies like Six, for example, which you might know, a huge brand listed company. They offer a new service which will be introduced very soon, that you can take every car they have on the planet. You can drive it for a couple of minutes, or you can take it for the whole day. And it probably will take another 3-4 years, and they have autonomous driving cars as well. If it comes on digital consumer internet, what we're talking, then it is a pretty tough place in Europe, because if you produce a product or service in America and you have the same service in Europe, or you do it in China, and the business starts scaling, the American product is probably 8 to 12 times larger in revenues compared to the German market, which is, with Austria and Switzerland, if you talk about the German-speaking people, one of the largest markets. And if you go to China, they probably scale 15 to 20 times.
So that's the reason, Stefan. You're saying the markets aren't big enough, so Europe is not appearing on the top of the league table in terms of multi-billion-dollar companies. That's why American and Chinese companies dominate. Some people might say that the Europeans just aren't very innovative.
That is probably a fair point, but lots of the
Fair?
products...
You're saying that they're not very good at innovation?
It's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Any Europeans in the audience? By the way, we don't include Israel in Europe, so you guys are more innovative than the Europeans.
So I would definitely say that a lot of products you see today have been copycats of American founded companies. And, but a lot of companies have also been introduced before they were in America, in Europe. And if you see the numbers, it is very clear if you have an e-commerce service where you just have to translate the pages and you have to build warehouses, then you scale easily throughout Europe like Zooplus, which was a Boda former investment. But if it comes to social networks where you have individual languages, if it comes to businesses which involves languages or content, then you have 120 million people in the German-speaking market, you have 60 in the French-speaking market, you have in Britain 55 to 60, depending how you count. A friend of mine is Klaus Hommels, a very famous European venture investor, and he says it's easier to scale a company in Hindu in India than in Europe, if content, if language or community is involved. And that's probably a fair point.
So in Brussels yesterday, you articulated, I thought, a very engaging 5-point innovation plan to get Europe to be more innovative. Do you want to very briefly outline those 5 points?
Absolutely.
Very briefly, because we have a lot of stuff to go through.
Yes, I think the first of all, what we need is that we need a legal framework which all work on, that if you are operating within Europe, that we have one GDPR, that we have similar tax laws and the way how it's being used are similar. Second, if it comes to universities, we need world-class engineers and product people. And today, we have great universities, but if you talk to a high-tech company on the planet, if you talk to our car industries, even with the best universities, there is a gap to Stanford, Culver City, and don't underestimate the Chinese initiative on the Silkway means 40 new universities on artificial intelligence until 2025 means there will be world-class engineers also coming out of China, and data scientists means we have to be able to be world-class, because you don't need 5,000 engineers or 10,000 engineers. The number you have seen from big American tech companies are only barriers to entry in your head to start a new business.
So you got, so we've got, of your 5 points, we've got regulation, we've got education. What are the other 3 points?
I think it's very important that we keep the markets open, and I found it very interesting that in America is now the discussion starting about breaking up big tech. That is running. I think the connection between the Trump administration and the tech companies is zero. That is a big difference compared to the Obama administration. And I think I would make a bet here in 3-4 years' time. I think the chances that Google is the way as it is, I have my doubt that this is the case. Second thing was Amazon. As you know, Donald Trump is directly attacking Jeff Bezos for his investment into a media company, and I think he will put much more time.
Donald Trump directly attacking? You sure about that?
It's public information. I mean, he had a couple of tweets where he said...
He seems such a gentle kind of guy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
okay,
I think the
fifth
point is very important, and that's also something I give here to all the founders who are in the room. Don't sell your company too early.
You hear that, entrepreneurs? Don't sell your company too early.
If you
mean the Europeans do that? The Europeans?
I mean, I know so many founders who sold companies, and if you see the companies, if you as a founder see this company is scaling, and I know we as strategic buyer, we love to buy companies who are scaling, who are making profits, who are growing. But to be honest, my recommendation for all of you is, if your company is scaling, if it's working, just think about the big companies in America. Larry Page, all the people you have that they didn't sell their company. They are major shareholders today, even if they're IPO. So my recommendation is not to sell too early.
How would you distinguish the Israeli innovation economy from the European one?
I think here you have a couple of advantages in Israel. You have a global network, especially with the United States, and if you provide some technology here with the Israeli network, with the Jewish network in America, you can scale very fast in America, and that's a huge competitive advantage Israel has. My feeling is, if it comes to technology, in certain areas like information technology, artificial intelligence, Israel is absolutely world-class, and I would say, Andrew, that we probably lack in a couple of countries this kind of world-class engineering, and don't underestimate what the military and the surveillance technology in this country
the message in Startup Nation
is providing for the Israeli tech industry once the people leave the army or the air force or the military structure to start their own companies. I've met a couple of founders here who came out directly from the military with great ideas how to build great products on technology, and that's a competitive advantage, of course, we don't have.
Stefan,
the market is smaller. The disadvantage here in Israel, it's a smaller market. Once product starts to grow, the Europeans there have an advantage. It's not as large as America, but what I said, we have so many examples from scaling here from Israel to America, or selling the company to America is a great opportunity for many Israeli founders.
Would it be fair to sort of establish a third category or fourth category in the world? You've obviously got China, the US, Europe, and then Israel, Singapore, Estonia, countries that are unique, but perhaps could be categorized together because of their uniqueness, because of their small, because they're all in one way or the other startup nations?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Well, could you categorize Israel with Singapore and Estonia as startup nations, as places that can really compete because of their agility with China and the US and Europe?
I think the word startup nation is a perfect word, because a lot of innovative products come out of Israel, and they're entrepreneurial-driven people here. There's world-class technology. If I would do a ranking, I have to admit I don't have the official ranking. I'm sure that there are a couple of those who rank, but I would say it is probably in certain areas like artificial intelligence, like autonomous driving, like radar technology. It's among the top 3 in the world because of the quality of the technology and the quality of the people. In other areas like e-commerce, it's probably lacking behind.
So you're the digital guy at Bird. You see a lot of interesting stuff. We just had a panel about blockchain. Give me your reality check on 2 or 3 of these massively sort of exciting fields. Blockchain, is it for real?
Yes. There are a couple of business models which we see. I give you one example which I truly believe will work. So in the advertising field are now blockchain companies, and you do it the opposite way. As an advertiser, you pay, and you don't pay 60 days afterwards, what the agencies do, but you give the money through the blockchain directly to the publisher. And you get full-scale transparency on the whole process. And you take out 40 or 50% of the value being destroyed. And there are a couple of companies around who try to remodel the advertising field that went totally nuts by having today so many intermediary companies in between, and that is an area where we see a lot of things. What we had here, money transaction, transaction of currencies, the discussion we had before is also a topic. Is this as hot, as large as we think? Well, I'm since '94 in digital or technology, and I have seen so many hot topics. Today, what can I say? It's very hard to predict what really scales globally to very large topics.
Yeah.
You probably can say that in 2 or 3 years. You can judge that.
Is there an element of fraud and of just sort of hyper froth in ICOs and this obsession with digital currencies, of distributed digital currencies? And that maybe you're saying that we shouldn't confuse the blockchain revolution with the Bitcoin revolution?
I would say you can see in 2 or 3 years how sustainable that is. Because we had these waves of new innovative technology in the last 20 years a couple of times. And at the end of the day, the market consolidates to a very few large service providers who consolidate the market. And my feeling here is probably the same. It will be the same with autonomous driving, probably. It will be the same with data recognition. If you think about hospitals, what can be done today already. Not only Watson is analyzing tons of data. There are lots of companies who go in this field. At the end of the day, it will consolidate, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 global players.
What about quantum, Stefan? I know DLD been very early in doing panels about quantum in Munich the last couple of years. I just did a big panel in Palo Alto on quantum. Is that for real now, or is that still remarkably speculative and early? Quantum technology as opposed to quantum computing. Is it really the next big thing, or is it just froth?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, if you don't know, who does know?
And I would say I don't know. After this long period of time, we have seen so many technologies coming in. I'll give you one example. So 3 years ago, everyone talked about virtual reality. And if you see the valuations of the company we have seen at that time, everyone said virtual reality is the next big thing. We had Google Glasses being sold. Everyone here in the room, who doesn't know Google Glasses? Raise your hand. Okay, if you don't know.
If everyone in the room, how many of you have startups in virtual reality? One, wait, two.
Okay, but we had. You
and how
remember
many
the
of you
discussion?
were in virtual reality?
Just think about what happened 3-4 years ago with Cinemax as a big American player, the lawsuit between Facebook and them, acquiring technology around.
Right.
So it is very hard to say. The older I get, the more careful I am on predictions. If you ask me what the big trends are, if it comes to dollars, I think the whole car industry, which is one of the largest industries in the whole world, will dramatically change in the next 10 years due to the sharing industry and to autonomous driving. I think we will see all kind of ways of transportation. Here in Tel Aviv, you have the, how do you say that, the scooters? Is it scooter? Electric scooter. In America, you have now 5 huge startups who are distributing these kind of things. I saw companies who are now building small scooters with a small roof. I think transportation, you have Flixbus, which is scaling in America. They think about buying Greyhound to change transportation in America. So transportation for me is one of the large, big topics we will see.
Talk very briefly but broadly about AI. Everything is, of course, AI, but I know you're pretty bullish in the AI economy, and at Berda you see this as being critical and not much of a bet.
The biggest chance I see, if you have a large number of data sets, you can produce a much better customer experience. I give you one example. So we use very artificial, I would say, from today's technology point, artificial intelligence in our CRM systems. And if I see today the emails I get compared to 3 years ago and 5 years ago, how specialized they are, how they really are being produced on my search results, which I do on a platform when I'm LinkedIn, like Holiday Check, which is the TripAdvisor of Germany. If I see how precise they are, what they offer, it's a huge increase in customer experience, a positive increase. You see huge increases in conversions. You see much lower marketing
But you've got to have access to the data, so the regulatory environment is critical in the AI economy, right?
Yeah, but if you give permission, you have to see if you give permission to a platform, you work with the permission, even under GDPR and even under e-privacy, which is in Europe in discussion right now. If you are a customer, you have the ability to work with these data sets and to analyze it backwards and forwards like you want. There is no restrictions planned so far, but you have to be a customer. It's a very different topic if you buy data on the internet. That will be regulated or is already being regulated.
You've looked carefully at GDPR, the new regulation in Europe designed to protect the integrity of the customer's data online. How does GDPR change the AI economy potentially? Does that give advantages to startups in Israel or Europe as opposed to the big players in the US, particularly obviously Facebook and Google?
I would say if you are already a customer of a platform and you have a permission, you gave the permission, then of course it will not change, it will be not negative affected. But just think about all of you who have a LinkedIn account, and LinkedIn, by pressing a small button, uploaded your full telephone book with all the numbers you had into WhatsApp, for example, or into LinkedIn. These kind of services, and this working with these data sets, will be limited in the future. Only where you give permission, where the customer, where the consumer gives permission, the data can be used. And you can't buy and extend the data sets you have like you can do today in America. You can't do that in Europe. I have, Andrew, a clear feeling if I look at the Constitution's discussion we have at the moment about data protection in America, that America is following. You're living in California. California is working on such a thing. We have the same coming out of New York. And I think in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, in America, you will see a GDPR discussion as well. Many of the companies we talk to believe it increases customer satisfaction, and therefore it's a good thing, especially after introduced now GDPR for the European markets.
Talk to me a little bit about what Berda's doing. As the digital guy, you see a lot. You're what are you, the second or third largest media company in Germany, but a lot of your business is in magazines. You're a media company. What are you particularly interested in terms of investment and innovation from Börde's point of view, and who in the audience might you be interested in talking to?
Okay, so we have, we do this year probably out of 2.8 billion euros, 1.5 billion in digital. And that means we have companies which we own from a majority perspective in Germany, Austria and Switzerland, and we love to acquire companies in these fields. We also have a venture business which is headed by my colleague Martin Weiss, who's also here, and we are investing into marketplaces and platforms. We are an investor in Vinted, for example. It is an exchange for clothes platform. We have all the kind of investments in Asia. We invested into the Autovan model of Asia, and so we don't go, I would say, it's fair to say we don't invest now today into advertising models because those markets are captured by Google and Facebook. But beside of that, we really look for marketplaces in Europe and in Asia, and we do not have, what can I say, we do not have a strict rule. So we invested here in Israel a couple of years ago via two funds, and we have a couple of investments in America as well. The good thing, if you're private, you can do what you want. If you find the right management team, the right team who really has a world-class idea. So if you have a world-class idea, come to me and talk to me, and Martin is here as well, my colleague, to talk to who's heading the investment business.
And is that why Börde has invested so much in DLD? Is this your seeding network, your ability to build sort of an innovation platform through meeting entrepreneurs at events like this?
Actually, that is a great question you're asking. We built DLD because we thought we want to have a media company. We see DLD, the company is called DLD Media, and we don't see it as DLD Investments. And we rather have a great media product. We try to build great content. If you know our conference, you have been there. It is rather a content company than an investment company. But I have to admit, you're right. Out of DLD came a lot of investments we have made, came a lot of connections. But I have to say, we are investor into digital since '96. So we are, what can I say, we are picky investor. Means we don't spread and pray. We do a couple of investments, but we focus very much on the ones where we believe rather later stage, not so much early stage. Investment through funds in markets we don't know, but we are more picky than lots of, like a venture fund, you know? We, as a company, we don't have a venture fund, means if we lose companies, if a third goes away in the venture business, it goes through the P&L, and that follows us to, that brings us to the point that we rather invest a bit later than early stage.
Final question, Stefan. We've got 30 seconds left. Easy final question. We're back here, I hope, in 5 years. How's the world, in the startup world, in Israel, in Europe, in the US and China? What are going to be, very, very briefly, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, what are going to be the big differences in 5 years' time? And in 5 years, everyone will have forgotten, so you can be wrong on this. But be brave, be bold here.
My feeling is the Chinese e-commerce companies like Alibaba will be a major player in Europe and in America. They're coming, they get tons of money, they are state-funded, they have a massive support. In 5 years' time, China will play. It will not only be Europe and America, what we talk today. You will have a DLD conference here in 5 years, and you will have Chinese sitting all over the place, also here on the panel. Starting from the e-commerce point, you can see how Alibaba is scaling at the moment already in Europe, that they now start to attack Amazon. They're going for it. So Chinese will be a big difference. Excuse me. The companies who are already successful and large will probably get much larger. Valuations might come down a bit in 5 years' time because we had now 10 years in a row growth and great valuations. If you see a lot of valuations today of tech companies, I'm not sure whether this is sustainable. You will see in the next correction, which will occur, not because the world is bad, but corrections happens after long growth terms. You're long in the business, you know they happen from all 5 to 10 years it happens. You will see big write-offs of startup companies that will make it, depending on the stage in 5 years' time, whether we have a great growth rate again, then you have great valuations. If we have a bad time, then you have a lower valuation. But at the end of the day, the whole world will turn digital. If I see today lots of industries, agriculture, 1% digital, probably 2. There's so many industries not being digitalized yet. Media and artificial intelligence data is far, far ahead if you see the percentage of the business already being turned. And there's so many businesses who start digitalizing right now, and you will see them here on the stage. You might see someone with data in health, and he's providing services for you. You get a needle in your bloodstream, and lots of your pain is being cured for all your rest of your life. We will see a lot of things in health. We will see a lot of things in agriculture and technologies today, areas which are not technology used so much.
So there you have it, winner wisdom. Stefan, I want to thank you, and I'm sure you'll be available to talk to people afterwards, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew and Stefan, and we know that you